Monday morning to you folks. This is John Adamson with Seeking Light. And so, two things of concern today, which is interesting. One that I was just made aware of a few days ago, and you can find this, and let me get to the date, in the British Medical Journal, or the BMJ.com. The British Medical Journal just published a report on November 2nd of this year. The name of the report is COVID-19, researcher blows the whistle on data integrity issues in Pfizer's vaccine trial. So anyway, apparently there was a third party that was hired to do investigation. The name of the party is Ventavia. And by the way, YouTube, everything I'm saying is confirmable and available online. You just need to do research. Anyway, Ventavia. So this third party was investigating Pfizer in terms of their integrity. And so there was a significant amount of concerns that one of these Ventavia reviewers had concerning Pfizer and their testing of the hokey pokey. Says, here are the concerns. Participants were placed in a hallway after injection and not being monitored by clinical staff. So, one of the things they're supposed to be checking for is adverse events. And so if they can't monitor people that have just gotten the shot, the hokey pokey, they should be closely watching them to catalog any potential issues, but they didn't. Lack of timely follow-up of patients who experienced adverse events. That's kind of problematic. Vaccines not being stored at proper temperatures. That's a big concern. Mislabeled laboratory specimens. Targeting of Ventavia staff for reporting these types of problems. So when you have a medication coming out potentially to treat a vast swath of human beings, you want to make sure that you're fully out in the open about clinical effectiveness, about proper protocols, transparency. And what this journal points out, the British Medical Journal points out, is there was a severe lack of this. And so it calls into question all of the data that was gathered prior to FDA approval. Now, there are some articles that have come out, I've noticed, after the British Medical Journal came out. I saw one headline where they're going to disparage the British Medical Journal. And I'm going to question, where does that person or individual get their funding? The one that's going to disparage the British Medical Journal. And, the British Medical Journal is made up of a bunch of fallible human beings too. So maybe their report is wrong. But it is important to ask these questions, to be transparent about them, put them out in front of the public. Let us decide, was Pfizer truly transparent? And I think many of us know the answer on that. So anyway, this is verifiable. It's found at the BMJ.com, and that's just part of it. So let's get to the ETS. There we go. The ETS, which is OSHA's Emergency Temporary Standards, that were issued by Biden. Now, first of all, good news. You may have seen it. A federal appeals court blocked, at least for the time being, the ETS and going into effect. And of course, there's going to be a lot of pushback from the administration right now because it's not set to go into effect yet. The hard end date for it to be fully in effect is January 4th of 2022 for all provisions to be in effect. So they still have time to fight. So let's look at the scope and application paragraph. And these are the questions and answers. Here's the first question. How must employees be counted to determine if the employer meets the 100 employee threshold for coverage under this ETS? And then there's sub questions. Sub question number one. Are employees who perform work at off-site locations, such as customer homes, counted? And think about, of course, there's healthcare ETS too, but you think about home health and things like that. Or let's say you work for a large plumbing company and they have more than 100 employees and you're going out to do work. Okay, so are employees who perform work at off-site locations, such as customer homes, counted? Yes. In determining the number of employees, employers must include all employees across all of their U.S. workplaces, regardless of the employee's vaccination status or where they perform their work. For example, if an employer has 150 employees and 100 of them perform maintenance work in customers' homes, primarily working from their company vehicles, i.e. mobile workplaces, or rarely or never report to the main office, that employee would fall within the scope of this standard. Now, keep in mind, one of the things that Biden and OSHA have said the reason for this mandate is to protect the employee. So what they're saying is if you work by yourself, if you rarely, if ever, go into the office, and let's say you're working, hardly like interacting with people, you're keeping the social distance, what is the risk to you? What is the risk? All right, let's continue. Is this count based on 100 employees for the entire business or 100 employees per individual location? It says the count should be done at the employer level, firm or corporate wide, not the individual location level. Now, this is where, there's multiple places where like there's some kind of cognitive dissonance. There's this issue of logic that's problematic. Suppose you have an employee site, single company with 99 employees, and they all work together in the same location. And then you have this branch of this 10,000 employee company where only 10 people work. You see where I'm going with this? Why is it that the 99 working in a single company don't have this mandate applied to them, yet the 10 in this branch location of this large company who work together are? Why? Can't answer that logically. Okay, let's move on. Therefore, for a single corporate entity with multiple locations, all employees at all locations are counted. For example, if a single corporation has 50 small locations, kiosks, concession stands, with at least 100 total employees in its combined locations, that employer would be covered, even if some of those locations have no more than 1 or 2 employees assigned to work there. Okay, next question. How are employees counted in franchisor-franchisee settings? In a traditional franchisor-franchisee relationship in which each franchise location is independently owned and operated, the franchisor and the franchisees would generally be separate entities for coverage purposes, such that the franchisor would only count corporate employees and each franchisee would only count employees of that individual franchise. Yada, yada, yada. So again, cognitive dissonance. Okay. Are part-time employees included in the 100 employee mark? Short answer, yes. Are independent contractors counted or included in the 100 employee threshold? No. Independent contractors do not count towards the total number of employees. And this I find fascinating. And here's one caveat. I think that if this goes through, if we're having a hard time fighting it, if employers want to protect, keep their employees, keep them employed, keep them working, one opportunity might be that they make their employees independent contractors. Now, obviously, some people will go, well, what about my retirement? What about my health care? And that's important to think about, but think about what your employers shell out in terms of your benefits. Could you arrange to receive extra pay that would equal to your total payout between salary and benefits, where you can then purchase your own health care or set aside money for retirement? And still, maybe you should have access to your retirement funds, right? Maybe you won't get the matching or whatever through your work. But anyway, there are ways perhaps using this out for contractors that would at least allow you to keep working. Okay, let's continue. Do employees who are working from home count towards the 100 employee minimum? Yes. There's and like any human document, there's conflicting information in this document. So in other places they say, and I forget where it was. I think it was back to question number 1. The answer seems to be no. So, and that was actually the healthcare ETS. But let's continue. Yes, if an employer has 150 employees, 100 of whom work from their homes full-time and 50 of whom work in an office, at least part-time, the employer would be within the scope of the ETS. Yada, yada, yada. However, the standards requirements would only apply to the 50 employees who work in the office, at least part-time, around other individuals, and not those 100 employees working exclusively from their homes. All right. So now at least that wasn't inconsistent. But it's still the sheer idiocy. So you're saying the 50 people that work in the office, even though they're truly the only 50 people there, because their total count of employees is greater than 100, they're worse off. They're mandated, unlike the 99 people that work in a single company, all working in the same place. How is that even logically possible? I continue. How are employees from staffing agencies counted? Boy. Okay, in scenarios in which and this affects, some of you might be travelers, like traveler jobs. I know that's huge in therapy and nursing. Even respiratory therapists became big during COVID. In scenarios in which employers of a staffing agency are placed at a host employer location, only the staffing agency would count these jointly employed workers for purposes. Okay. So say you're an employer that has 99 employees. So you're outside the mandate. And then you have some contract staffing agency people coming in, so that puts you over 100. And let's say that staffing agency is under 100 employees too. So what this indicates is both of you would be exempt. Logic? And I'm fine with that. That's great for those two companies at that point. I'm fine with that not being mandated, because the mandate is stupid and un-American, to put it bluntly. So I'm fine with that. But there's no logic behind it. How will temporary and seasonal workers be addressed in the employee count? Okay, they are counted in determining if the employer meets the 100 threshold. All right, let's continue. I'm summarizing and highlighting the facts that are stating, because this can go on forever. How are employees counted at multi-employer work sites? Well, they already answered that. I don't know why that's a separate question. Is vaccination status considered in counting employees? No. So it doesn't matter if everybody's is vaccinated. You're still going to be have to have all these mandates in place, like masking, etc. Are employees who work exclusively outdoors counted? And this is what really frustrates me, because the number one place you're not likely to get the disease? Outside. There was an early study in YouTube, you can verify this, when they were talking about super spreader events early on. They looked at well over 100 super spreader events, and there was only one of those that occurred from an outside exposure. All the other ones were inside. And that's why we see spikes seasonally. Like it's getting cold here in Virginia, and the numbers are starting to climb. During the summer, Florida, Arizona, Texas, they started to see a climb in their rates. Why? Because everybody goes inside because of climate control. Because it gets darn hot in the south in the summer. And then right now, guess what? Their numbers are going down. Why? Because it's beautiful outside down there. Whereas now in where we live, it's colder. And the north is getting increased spikes right now. Like Vermont is way up there. Why? Because it's chilly. All right, let's continue. Are employees who work out exclusively outside counted? Yes, if an employer has 125 employees and 115 of them work exclusively outdoors, that employer would be covered. However, the standards protections would only apply to the 10 employees working in an indoor setting. Okay, all right, that makes me feel better. I hadn't read this before, so but it's still logically inconsistent. Not to those employees working exclusively outdoors. Our employees, you know what you could do? Suppose if you had an office, you could just have like a bunch of individual cheap mobile offices and just have like a few people work in each. Could you like, I don't know, make it so that it's technically an outdoor structure? I wonder if there's a possibility there. Anyway, let's continue. Are employees who are minors counted? Yes. What qualifies as work done exclusively outdoors? Let's see what that is. The employee must work outdoors on all days. Okay. The employee must not routinely occupy vehicles with other employees. I wonder, routinely, what does that mean? Not defined. The employee works outdoors for the duration of every workday except for de minimis, Latin, I'll have to look that up, use of indoor spaces where other individuals may be present, such as a multi-stall bathroom. Just hold it. Just make it through the day holding it. Don't try to go to the bathroom. Okay, the employee's work must truly occur outdoors. So I guess, if you're doing construction of new buildings outside, if you're doing groundwork, you're all set. So all those illegal immigrants who are working on landscaping companies, oh, that's right, they're beyond the law. How do employers determine if they meet the 100 employee threshold? Oh boy. Oh, if they have fluctuating employee numbers. I'll let you read that for yourself if you're interested. Who has responsibility for contractor employees? The contractor or the host? I think they answer that. Contractors. Okay, that was already answered. Would a state or local government employer with more than 100 employees be subject? Duh. Wait a minute. Uh-oh. The ETS does not apply to state and local government employers in states without state plans, because state or local government employees employees are exempt from OSHA coverage. That's interesting. Okay. How will the ETS apply to unionized workplaces? They've got to follow it. Boy, the unions are loving that. Does the ETS apply to workplaces covered by safer... Okay, we're getting in the weeds here. Does the ETS apply to the U.S. Postal Service? Yes. Does the ETS apply to employees in settings covered by the healthcare ETS? No, because the healthcare ETS is a little bit more strict. If an employer has employee... Okay. All right, I'm going to stop there because a lot of this is just redundant. So anyway, the bottom line is we see a lot of logical inconsistencies throughout the whole thing. Excuse me. But like I said, it's on hold. So, Lord willing, the courts will continue to say, no, you can't put this into effect. Lawsuits are abounding. I know a number of states have filed a lawsuit against the Biden administration and OSHA related to this. I know that individual employers like the Daily Wire have filed lawsuits against OSHA and the Biden administration related to this. And so if you have a company or you're part of a company and if they're saying that they'd like to fight this, let them know there are other lawsuits going on. Because like I know, for example, the Daily Wire has called for people to join them in this lawsuit because it's going to be very expensive. Retaining lawyers who are going to go before federal courts to argue against this is going to be huge money. They were already talking about it, their organization laying out hundreds of thousands of dollars. And, I think they said they have like 200 employees. That's a lot of money. And granted, they make good money, but still, the more companies that can join together, retain some really solid lawyer teams, pool their money, it's really going to help. And I think that's where we're at now. In fact, my company that I work for is slightly under 100 employees, and they have not said anything yet. They've indicated in the past they don't want to do the mandates, and we all work from home, so we may be excluded. But there might be some provision we haven't looked at yet that would implicate the need for us to be mandated. And if that's the case, I'm going to urge them to join some of these other organizations to pool resources to fight. So anyway, that's it. That's all I got for today. Comments, suggestions for future videos, I appreciate it. Anyway, this is John Adamson with Seeking Light. Take care.